At this time, I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's on the wrong side.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. I'll move us to agenda item number 2. To consider that agenda, are there any additions or deletions or corrections to that agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda and we'll move to agenda item number 3.
Would you like some?
Agenda item number 3 is to consider the approval of the minutes of the last regular city council meeting that was held on July 12, 2016. The council does have the minutes before them. Are there any corrections to note at this time?
Move the minutes. I'll second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by John to approve the minutes as they have been prepared. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4, this is a public hearing on the ordinance that would amend the wages for the mayor and the city council members. I'll ask Tom Millbrook to come forward and briefly explain this ordinance, which the council is required to at least address every year.
Mayor, council members, the item before you is the adoption of an ordinance adjusting the wages or the salaries for the mayor and council. It's been past practice that the city council follows the wage increase for the employees, but it's 1 year behind, and usually it does not take effect until after the first of the year, after an election. So basically the increase would be 2.5% for 2017 and 18, and 2.75 for 2018. 16, 17.
Okay, thank you, Tom. As part of the public hearing, then we'll open up for any comments either from the city council members or members of the audience. If there's no comments, is there a motion to close this public hearing? Motion by David, is there a second?
Second.
Second by John, discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Okay, that motion passes. We'll now then consider the ordinance that would amend the wages. Are there any questions about the ordinance? Not, is there, what are the wishes of the council?
I'll move adoption of the ordinance.
Motion by Larry, is there a second? Seconded by David, discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda, which include the request for the authorization to apply for the HSEM grant, the acknowledgement of the application for the exempt permit for the Prairie Home Hospice Incorporated, consider the approval of the temporary 3.2% malt liquor license for the VFW Post 742. Consider the application for the exempt permit for Pheasants Forever, Lyon County chapter. consider the authorization to execute the master subscriber agreement between the Marshall Police Department and the Minnesota Court Data Services. Consider the application for exempt permit for the Marshall M Club for an event on October 19, 2016. And then also finally the bills and the project payment. So is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the council wants to remove for purposes of a separate discussion?
There's just a couple of housekeeping items on the forms that probably need to be fixed. So I'll just talk to Tom afterwards.
You can handle that administratively. Okay, great. Any other questions about the items on the consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda. I'll second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by John to approve the items on the consent agenda. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll then move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 13. Consider the approval of the garbage recycling organic hauling contract between the City of Marshall and the successful respondent for services at the Red Baron Arena and Expo Center. This was actually tabled from our last meeting for additional consideration analysis, and so I will call on Nicholas Johnson to provide a summary of your analysis and your recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. Last time we had met, this was tabled because we were not able to, for whatever reason, we didn't have the Southwest Sanitation RFP included on the agenda items. This time should have been on there for everybody's review. Then I also took the liberty to include a quick summary sheet comparing the two requests for proposals. Some notable items on there. It's a 5-year proposal. Southwest Sanitation had proposed a flat rate of $9,728.27 for all services. That would just be one dump, 1,000 dumps, not that many, but to do all the services that were needed. Oh,
Yeah, if you put the analysis up on the screen. Thank you.
so Southwest Sanitation had a flat rate for services for the arena, while Waste Management broke it out on a per month basis, and that was included on that second section there under Waste Management. And then I did a handful of different scenarios based upon, so years 1 through 3 and 4 and beyond are based on Waste Management, about the number of dumps, and MSW stands for Municipal Solid Waste, which would be trash. And then you have the SS is single sort for recycling, and then you have organics. And these are a handful of different scenarios that gives the costs associated with each type of scenario. Since Southwest Sanitation is at a flat rate, that's what it would be regardless of the dumps. But with Waste Management, depending on how many dumps you have, it's a variable cost you have in there. So just to give us a little bit of comparables, we just had a state tournament out at our ball fields at the arena, and we dumped those. I was told by city staff we dumped the dumpster 4 times for that one event to give an idea of scale. I believe also had in there at the old Lockwood Motors Arena, they reported having a 4-yard dumpster for garbage and a 2-yard dumpster for cycling. During the off-season, they would dump an average of once per week. During peak season, they would dump on an average of twice per week, and that was for 1 sheet of ice and did not include the ball fields as well. So tried to find as best comparables as we could to give council an idea of what the dumping would be like. Given this past state tournament, what we saw at the Lockwood Motors Arena, also to notable items for Waste Management, the reason there's years 1 through 3 and 4 and beyond is because the triple stream, you can see it at the top there, the triple stream bins for Waste Management would be rented for the first 3 years, and after 3 years, they would then be owned by the city, which introduces a little bit of risk if you want to own those If they get marred, damaged, destroyed, after those 3 years, it would be the city's cost to replace them, rather than if they were continuing to be rented, then it would be up to the contractor or the service hauler in order to do the replacement or those items, since they wouldn't be ours. So that's one other item to take into consideration, and that's the breakdown between the years 1 through 3 and 4 and beyond, because after 4 and beyond, if you choose to own, then that rental amount would drop off the total amount. But as you can see, if we're doing 2 dumps per month, and with 2 dumps per week on the trash and solid waste, and 1 per month on organics, which is based on what we've been finding, probably it's going to be more than that. That's about matching what Southwest Sanitation has with waste management. Anything more than that, and Southwest Sanitation has the better bid on that.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you for your work on providing that analysis. Questions the council has on the proposals?
Maybe Mr. Ritter would come forward if we have some questions.
Can't hear very well with that on.
Turned off.
Glenn, your questions?
Well, one of the items that is certainly different is the collection bins, the 10 that are in the facility. In the one case, we are buying it over a 3-year period, and in your proposal, you indicated that they probably cost about $8,000 to $11,000.
Yeah, the ones that we looked at, yeah. The ones that we looked at, yes.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the useful life of those things would be?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now,
I would say a long time because they're inside.
Okay.
So.
And inside of them, there's trash bags and stuff, so it's not like they get banged around. Don't you?
No.
There are-
And that's done by the custodians in the arena.
They just take out the trash.
Take out the liner.
Put it in the dumpster then.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, in your proposal then, what the city is basically you're renting them to the city under your proposal. Is that correct? Or
No, I'm supplying them for the use of the
For the duration
project
of
for the
contract?
duration of the contract.
for the 5 years?
Yep.
But they belong to you, not to the city.
Yes.
Okay. Whereas under the waste management, the city would own them after the 3-year
After
period.
you've paid for them, sure.
Right.
But you can buy mine if you want too, you know.
And that's why it's kind of hard when I'm trying to compare apples and apples, and it's
Sure,
pretty hard
sure.
here. And the first 3 years we're buying the dumpsters, and years 4 and 5 we're not. So then the payments go way down. Actually, the first 3 years includes not only the service but also the purchase, which it runs about $1,600 a year. If you take the $8,000 divided by 5 years, that's about $1,600 a year is the difference. So that's what's hard for me, is because, like I said, in the first 3 years they're higher because we're buying it, and in the last 2 years we're not buying it. And after the last 2 years, it's ours. We make no further payments. Whereas under your proposal, it's basically included in the
Yeah.
fee per year. And so that's why it's kind of hard to compare them. It's not apples and apples. It's apples and oranges. And then the big question is, how many times are we going to need it per month or per year? And boy, that makes it hard to compare, because who knows at this point?
Not on mine, it doesn't make it hard.
No,
No, okay.
yeah, but it's hard to compare theirs to yours, because it's guaranteed with you no matter what.
Well, I know what came out of the other facility because I was a service provider.
Okay.
And that's nothing compared to this one.
Well,
All they had was vending. They never had a concession stand or ball fields.
I think, Glenn, you did identify the 2 variables that we have.
Yeah.
One is those containers, and the other, actually the larger variable, is how many times are the containers going to be full and need to be emptied. So in fairness to all the bidders, we do have the representative from Waste Management, I believe, here too. So if there are any questions. So
But that was one of the main questions I had was what those bins, because like
that
I
it?
say, that's a.
You got any more?
Not right now. No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions the council has? Larry, or excuse me. Are you done? Larry?
I want to say one of the things that I really dislike about RFPs is when we play the shell game, not knowing exactly where anything is at. But I did some math on last night on the proposals, and I came up with $50.70 a yard if we go with the proposal the way it is now for waste management, and going with those same numbers on the amount of garbage that we generate in a year, and using the figures from Southwest Sanitation, they come up with $40.53 a yard. Now that does not include the softball complexes. So if you take and add those numbers back into what we do out there, you know, it just becomes basically a pretty easy decision on my part on which route to go.
Other questions the council may have? John, and then we'll come back to you, Glenn.
I guess not really a question, just more of a comment. You know, the way the primarily the waste management quotation is put together in the calculations regarding the organics, it's just pretty much figured as one a month. I'd be a little concerned in July with a bin of organics out there, sitting out there for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So I think that's something to consider too. I don't think we're going to be waiting that long to dump that organics, assuming we do get that contract or that grant. So I'm concerned about, you know, the fact that, you know, in the pricing, even Administrator Johnson's analysis, we're down 1 or 2 times. Well, I guess we get down to three organics a month in the one scenario. And yeah, I guess that gets on up there. So,
Glenn, you had another comment?
I was just curious. I know we're going for a 5-year contract, and with a 5-year contract, you know, you lock it in for 5 years, but you know, it's hard, and especially since it's a new facility, it's really hard to estimate what's our use. We have no track record, no history, and so it's risky for the city, and it's risky for the haulers too. So was there a reason we didn't go for a shorter period of time, see what the track record is, and then we could be more comparing apples and apples, because we'd have a history as to how many times they need to remove the trash and the compost and so forth on a monthly or weekly basis. Was there a reason we went for the 5 years and didn't go for shorter so we could have a track record?
My understanding of this, and if somebody else has some greater knowledge, please step in, is that the RFP was handled by the Ignite group that was hired to kind of do all of them. And so that was the origination and source of the 5-year. Why they chose that 5-year, I'm not certain.
Yeah, it's probably a balance, Glenn, you know, between knowing your costs for a longer period of time, but you do identify, you know, there is that variable, what you're going to, how much garbage are you going to generate? So, but on the other hand, if the, you know, the goal of the facility is to have it active, and if it's active, people are going to be in there and they're going to be generating waste. So,
in business and in finance, there's risk and return. Higher risk, higher return, and lower risk, lower return. And for the haulers here, you know, having a 5-year is higher risk, and therefore it would be expected they would expect a higher return just to be on the safe side. And in finance too, the longer the time period, the more risk. There's more risk with 5 years than there is with a one-year contract. So, you know, that's my concern. Maybe we should have gone for maybe like a 1-year contract, got a track record, know what the risks are, and then everyone could come in with more accurate numbers, and we could get a better comparison of the two companies. Because right now, a lot of it seems apples and oranges, because we have no idea what the actual amount of, the actual number of times that we're going to have to remove the garbage.
John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with you, Glenn. I think there is a certain amount of risk here, and for me to mitigate some of that risk on the city's part, for me, it's going with sanitation, or Southwest Sanitation Services with a fixed price. So I'd make the motion that we award the contract to Southwest Sanitation for the fixed annual fee.
I'll second that.
Motion by John, second by Larry. Discussion on the motion.
I want to make just one comment. And I really think that if we go with the 5-year contract, if that arena grows the way it's expected to grow, and I see no reason why it shouldn't, in 5 years, the members that are sitting on this city council will be looking back and saying, you know, that city council in 2016 was made up of a bunch of geniuses.
What I was wondering is if Waste Management had any comments to make, since they're here, and do they have anything they would add to the discussion?
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. To award to Southwest Sanitation. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is the update to the process regarding the preferred beer advertising at the Red Baron Arena and Expo. Dennis, you provided the council a memo late this afternoon.
Right,
I
yes.
think that memo had kind of two options for.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. It has taken some time to sort through the information. The memo sets forth kind of the timeline of what happened with this particular contract. As City Administrator Johnson has indicated, the city did hire the Ignite Group to facilitate and kind of run with the solicitation of requests for proposals on various products or services within the building. One of those, and it's important to look at the terms. It is the preferred beer supplier. What I have learned subsequent to this process, we cannot have an exclusive beer provider in the facility.
Which is what the proposal asked for.
Correct. Well, it varied between preferred, but it is exclusive. The only exclusivity is in advertising. You can have advertisement of a particular brand within the facility at city-controlled events. Now, we're not advertising at a high school league, or a Marshall Area Hockey Association group. Those are not run by the city. We're not advertising there, but it can be exclusive in the advertising, but it is a preferred beer supplier, not exclusive. What had been drafted and put together when we thought we were going with the Dahl Distributing was it would be Budweiser, Michelob products, but Brau Brothers local products would also be a permitted, preferred brand within the facility. But that doesn't mean that, Miller products, Coors products, they could come in with a different caterer or something like that. So what had happened is the request for proposal went out in February. Responses were due March 18th. On March 16th, I have provided a copy of the written memorandum, and it's not really questions, it's just a statement. We, beverage wholesalers, we can't comply with some of your requests with the RFP. We can't comply because of both federal or state law, and that's the exclusivity. But because they did not submit a proposal by the end of March, or March 18th, the only one we had was Dahl Distributing. That was the agreement that was being put together, addressing preferred, addressing exclusivity of advertising, addressing advertising only at city events. But your motion of last month was to reject and resolicit. I'm not sure that the process was improperly conducted, and I am concerned about resoliciting now that we only sought proposals from 2 different companies. We know what Dahl's proposal is. It's a very fair, it's a very good proposal, and I don't want to be subject to, well, we will bid Dahl plus $1 is our beverage wholesaler's bid. We've got the high bid, give it to us. I am concerned about that type of issue. I think you have two options available. You could just say, Simpson, we think we did the right thing, put out new requests for proposals. A new RFP has been drafted addressing preferred only and addressing exclusivity of advertising. That is ready to go. Or if you think that the process was conducted fairly, you could rescind the motion and award a bid and tell me to proceed to finalize the contract. Those are the 2 options. And I do have Robert's Rules of Order here to address, and I've done some work on the motion to rescind. You cannot have a motion to reconsider, but you could bring a motion to rescind action taken at last meeting and proceed.
We'll open up for questions. I guess my, or discussion, my concern is that the vendor who did not submit asked the question that was actually clarified by you once the proposals were considered. So, and, I think it's unfortunate that when they asked the question, they, instead of submitting the bid, that they weren't gotten back to with it, that clarification didn't happen then. So I think that's the part of the process that justifies opening it up then and starting over. But that's my opinion. Other discussion of the council?
I have a question about the advertising. You said at city events or something that we could,
City-controlled events, I believe is the way.
okay, and we can limit who advertises for that. You're saying, or
The only beer advertising that would occur at those city events would be this contractor.
The preferred
Budweiser,
ones.
yes, the preferred, the Budweiser, the Michelob.
Okay.
That advertising would be exclusive to them at those events where that type of advertising is permitted.
and other events. Now, which ones are you? Did you say?
One thing, a hockey game, the city's not running that, the high school league. That's not a city-controlled event, regularly scheduled hockey or Maha events there.
But they're renting it from us. But it's considered their event, and they have control over it.
That would be my interpretation on the advertising, the advertising that appears on the screens.
So-
Yeah, youth hockey events, youth events, we're not going to be advertising preferred beer.
But they're kind of like Maha's events. Do they get the revenues from advertising for those at their events, or does the city get always the revenues? Who gets revenue for advertising during their events?
I don't think they get that advertising. Yeah, city continues, yeah.
So we're going to get the advertising revenue no matter what. But if it's their sponsored, they can limit who advertises.
Because you wouldn't want alcohol advertised at
Right, but-
a youth event.
I think that.
But I'm talking in general about all advertising. If they can determine who advertises at their event, but we still get the money for it, I mean, some of that,
Well, yeah, that's.
that doesn't make sense to me because they don't have to have any advertising. And if they do, it doesn't benefit them. It all goes to the city. So why would they have any advertising at all at their events?
There's signage and advertising, that's what they're buying, that's what these sponsorship funds are coming in for.
John?
Just, Dennis, just to be clear on what you're saying, as far as the response from Dahl Distributing, they responded in a manner that was correct for the state statutes and both state and federal?
They responded to the RFP. As we worked our way through the contract, we had to pare it down. The RFP required some placement of equipment within the building. We cannot place beer advertised equipment. They cannot have beer vending or coolers or anything. So we had to strike the equipment out of the RFP. That was one of the big changes. And then words dealing with exclusivity of beer supply, that term had to be removed also. So they were responsive to the RFP, but neither one is responsive to state law. And so that has been negotiated out after the fact.
Our RFP that was submitted was not,
Not in compliance with state law.
okay, not in compliance with state law. Okay.
Yes.
Dennis, do you know if on the March 16th memo addressed to Darren, yes, the last line says, please reach out to me with any questions. Do you know if that happened?
I do not. I believe that did not. This was the only email on that string of emails provided to me in response to this inquiry. Because the RFP required written questions, did not respond to a verbal questions, but an email written like this, and it was addressed as it should have been pursuant to the RFP.
The question we have here tonight is if we're going to go with Doll Distributing or rescind the motion, correct?
Well, if you, to go with Dahl Distributing, you would have to rescind the previous motion because the
Correct.
previous motion was to
Reject.
reject.
And if you do nothing, you have told me what to do. You have rejected, and you would like to solicit again RFPs.
I think in fairness to Lake Beverage, when they reached out looking for an answer, and I think they were waiting for us to give them an answer prior to submission. So I don't think that's fair to them, and I think we just need to go back and start all over.
And if we don't do anything right now, that's what's going to happen. It's going
That's
to be,
correct.
That's the action that has been taken.
so we
Yes.
just won't need to do anything then.
Any other input? My sense is unless there's a motion to rescind the previous motion, previous action, then we'll stand. Okay.
I would like to have them look into the advertising as far as the revenues and who receives the revenues and who decides the revenue from advertising.
Well,
That'd be nice to know.
That also should be clarified in the new RFPs that are going out. So. Thank you.
I can touch on that. The city does receive the revenue from the advertising.
For anybody that advertises at the arena, for any event,
Yes. Yep.
and
The
we
city's-
decide who gets to advertise.
I think it was more of a question. It's not necessarily that each individual gets to come in and decide what's displayed. I think it was specific to alcohol, and that during children, youth, non-city controlled events, the alcohol would simply be deleted, but the rest of the advertising would stay.
So everything's the same no matter what. On other events, it's just the alcohol that's the only item that we need to
Yep.
worry about. Okay.
It would just be the alcohol.
Thank you. Agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15, consider the approval of the resolution with the State of Minnesota Joint Powers Agreement between the City of Marshall on behalf of the City Attorney, Prosecuting Office, and the Police Department. Dennis, do you have this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Above on the consent agenda, item number 10 was a similar master agreement regarding the Marshall Police Department. Last meeting, you passed that same master subscriber agreement for the city attorney's office. I thought we were done with these agreements, but lo and behold, another one shows up from the state of Minnesota. This is dealing with the e-charging process. Everything is electronically submitted from the police department to the court, from my office to the courts. And so this would be the authorization to continue with that process. There is a motion that's included allowing for both the city attorney's office and the Marshall Police Department. we'd request approval.
And all of these really have to do with the BCA updating their system as of August 1st.
Yes.
Questions? Is there a motion then? Or, David, you have a question?
Comment here about reasonable cost assessed financial information.
And I'm sorry, Councilmember Sturrock. No, I do not know what the cost is.
Reasonable to guess that the system passed its first.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I'm not certain. I apologize, sir. And I don't know if Rob has any information or the finance director. I'm sorry. Yeah. Dealing with the reasonable costs to participate.
Rob, can you address whatever fees and costs may be associated with this?
Not specifically,
Okay.
but there is some cost to it, and with what we've had in the past, that's built into our budgeting process, so I wouldn't anticipate a significant change. Frankly, it came out when I was gone, so I haven't gone over the specifics, but there is some annual fee, and I'm thinking it's in the range of hundreds of dollars, but it's part of the administrative fee that they charge for it, but it's really something that we have to have for both the city attorney and the department to be able to interact through the criminal history process with the e-charging. It's going entirely to this e-charging process.
David?
Thank you, Chief, for that. Could we maybe get a follow-up memo at your convenience, just outlining what you know of those numbers?
Yeah, I will also. I
Dennis?
was ahead of you. Follow up with Sturrock is what is on my notepad.
The whole council.
Yes, I know.
We could put it in, we'll try and track it down between us and put it in the bi-weekly report.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Rob, you think we could save enough money on that to fix the air conditioner?
well, it's not our building here, but no, I don't think that would cover the cost of serious air conditioning work, so sorry. I suspect it's going to go up some, but I don't think it's going to be a major cost.
Well, the reality is, we have no choice. I mean,
That-
The cost of doing
If you're going
business.
to prosecute
Yeah.
any law
Yes.
breakers, this has to be done.
Yep,
So,
they've,
I'll move the recommendation.
Motion by Larry, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda
Thank
item
you.
number 16. Agenda item number 16, consider change orders at the Schwann's Regional Sports Event. We have two actions to consider, separated by change orders that result in a contract decrease and changes that result in a contract increase. Glenn, do you want to provide any overview?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. If you remember, this is the one major deduct that was because of the delamination of the concrete on the second floor. So about $32,600 plus was for that delamination issue. There was also a driveway that had since been transferred to a different contractor to install. So that came off of this contract. It wasn't a real net savings. It was just a different contractor did the work for about $9,000. So the net deduct of $42,056 included both of those major reductions to this contractor, plus a few $100s for some bolt issues that we had.
Is there any questions about that change order number 6? If not, I would entertain a motion on motion number 1, the change order that results in the contract decrease.
I'll make them. I'll second.
Motion by David, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. The second item then, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item was for electrical work that's been done, and it was for various reasons. There's about 16 different items, both plus and minus, mostly plus, having to do with the signage and the relationship of the scores table and the electrical equipment in the electrical room. So this was for the electrical work. Some of this is already recovered by the cost for the main video board and the wiring that went from there to the scores table that goes to the electrical room. So some of those costs are already being offset by income provided. But this was an increase of about $20,000.
These are change orders that were requested by the owner.
Requested by the owner previously, as a matter of fact. This is just a result of the change order itself.
Questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Larry?
as I went through that score sheet on all those change orders, I still felt there were several items on that score sheet that should have been included in the original contract, and I really hate having to approve this whole thing one way or another, because a lot of those I know that we requested, but on the other side, some of those things I think should have been included in the original proposal, so therefore I cannot support this.
Maybe a response back to that is that the contractor who did the work has no understanding of what should have been included. He did the work as far as what was directed to be done. I think.
But that's what we need to take up.
I think that's what we need to
ATS&R.
take up. We are in the process of developing that list, and we'll be discussing that at staff and with the city attorney for process. Then we'll be meeting with both WENC and ATS&R to define where, if you want to call it whose fault it is, or where it was generated from, or whose responsibility it is rather than whose fault it is. So that's something
I totally
that we
understand
have to
that,
do.
but the only choice I got to do is to deny it, where I'm at.
You could, but the contractor who did the work that was directed to do it, I'm just saying that it's, I think, our responsibility to pay them. But
And
that's just my
the
opinion.
items, the dozen or so items, those will all be on your spreadsheet as far as what is ATS&R's responsibility, what's the
Okay.
owner's responsibility, what is WINC's responsibility, what perhaps would be a contractor.
Correct. And that should be done before we approve any final payments to really any of our people, like WENC or ATS&R.
It has to be done prior to, because you will not get a refund check.
We won't get a refund check.
David?
Thank you for that additional explanation on this package of changes or change orders. This seems like a good time to comment on something I've discussed a bit with a couple of folks here. We need some clarity about what that reconciliation process is, if that's the right word, this great coming together with WINC and with ATS&R. If you could get us a memo here, and say by next meeting, that gives us your best forecast or understanding of that process. I'm not looking for a specific 4,200 point laundry list, but some indication of what you think the nature of the discussion is going to be. That would be very helpful for us as we consider any of the remaining change orders that may come to us.
I think we're ready to do that.
John?
Yeah, reading through this list as well on what the change orders are, take a little bit different view of it, and kind of going along with Councilman Glenn's earlier comments about the risk and the costs associated. Some of these, you wouldn't know what, like the electrical for some of the signage, things like that. Didn't know exactly what that was until some of the proposals came in and whatever. So if we're going to quote that originally in the contract, the contractor's risk is going to be greater, so he's going to quote it higher. In this case, what appeared to me is we waited until we knew what the sign was, where they needed to bring the power in, and then had the contractor do that and did it under a change order, which was specific to the application. So, honestly, a number of these, I'm okay with the change orders and the process, because it's just, you do things as you determine them. You can't define everything in the very beginning to account for everything. So with that, I'd make a motion to approve the change orders resulting in a contract increase.
Motion by John, is there a second?
I'm willing to second that with, just to, I've said this already, but
Make your second and then I'll discussion item. So,
additional seconds, all right. I'll second the motion for purposes of discussion.
thank you. Now discussion, David.
What I would want, I hope we all would want, is I think what you're saying, John, is this is a good faith issue? Is that how you're approaching it? Yes or no?
Not totally. I think there's some things that you know ahead of time, and there's some that you don't. And this
Okay,
we're just covering the ones that we didn't.
What I'm taking from your comments, John, is that we're empowering the contractor to make some best judgments of the moment.
Yes.
Construction.
Dealing with
Yes, the construction
or the
manager.
subcontractors, subject to this eventual reconciliation. Is that your understanding of it? Okay, with that, I'll support this.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 17 is the introduction of the ordinance opting out of the new statutory requirement for the temporary family health care dwellings. This was acted on, recommended by the Legislative and Ordinance Committee. It's actually recommended by the League of Minnesota Cities, and I believe this needs to be enacted by September 1st. The action tonight would be introduction.
To introduce the ordinance, yes, then to have the public hearing and the action on the ordinance at the next council meeting. Yes.
Any questions on the action? If not, is there a
I'll move
motion?
the introduction of the ordinance.
Motion by Larry, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Elaine. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18, consider the application for a temporary on-sale liquor license for SMSU Foundation, August 19th and 20th. Any questions about this? Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation.
Motion by Larry.
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Discussion. Move to a vote.
Excuse me.
Motion passes. We'll note the abstention. Agenda item number 19 is council member liaison reports. The Regional Development Commission did have their annual meeting since our last meeting, and it was held in Marshall. They did a nice tour of the solar farm, of the mattress barn, which is one of the borrowers from the Regional Development Revolving Loan Fund that I chair. They toured the Merit Center, and they had an overview of the Camden Regional Trail System, and then they had their annual meeting, and I think their annual meeting was reported in the paper, so I won't go into that. Fire Relief Association has not met since we last met. Larry?
The only one of mine that met was EDA, and I was unable to attend.
Glenn?
No report.
John?
I too was unable to attend, so hopefully Dennis can confirm that neither one of us got elected to anything while two of us are out. So, Utilities Commission meets tomorrow night, and Ways and Means did not meet.
Okay. David?
None of mine have met.
And Elaine?
And neither of mine met.
So, thank you. We'll move on then to agenda item number 20, which is council member individual items. Larry?
I have none.
Glenn?
I have none.
Elaine?
None.
David?
Brief comment on the summer conference of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, which met in Austin last week, and took notes on a lot of things. The general point of the legislative report was, well, not much got done, and maybe nothing will get done with or without a special session. So more of the same. We will have a representative from the coalition's lobby staff come and make a more substantive presentation at an upcoming meeting. I think, Nick, they'll be in contact with you about that. The other thing that was most useful was taking the tour of Austin and some of the things they've done with their downtown, I think are interesting for us, and perhaps we can look for some things to build on from that. Some more information to come.
John?
Nothing.
I would just make a very brief comment about the Camden Regional Bike Trail. The opening was on, not this past Saturday, but the prior Saturday, July 16th. I think there was, Kathy, what was there, like 300 people there? I mean, there was a, pardon me?
It was a great turnout.
Very good turnout. Beautiful morning. Later that day, it stormed, so it was the perfect timing. But the important part is that a number of people were able to experience that trail for the first time, and it really is a nice example of a nice cooperative effort between the state of Minnesota, Department of Natural Resources, the city of Lynn, city of Marshall, and Lyon County that really all came together on this, utilizing the majority of the funding from a legacy grant. So, and it is an asset that really is being used. So, with that, I'll move to agenda item number 21. Staff report, Nicholas.
I actually have one this time. I've had more than 2 days. Again, thank you, Mayor and Council. My first week came pre-packaged for me, which was nice to have put together. I had the pleasure of meeting with most of the city departments as well as MMU. I've toured and visited the majority of the city facilities and met with a lot of city staff. My second day, I got to sit in on the finalist interviews for the Community Services Director position, and then went right after that to do my first taping of News and Views with Elaine. And then finally had the City Council meeting after that. I've been able to meet with EDA and Chamber as well, and I've also been met with some of our consultants too. I've been spending quite a bit of time just getting acclimated to the organization and learning all of the functions. I knew this was going to be my greatest challenge in my growth as an administrator, so I'm looking forward to tackle it as fast as possible. I want to give my sincere appreciation to everyone I've had the pleasure of meeting, especially city staff. They have been very supportive and willing to help me with whatever I need to succeed. Their support, as well as the council, will be critical to the speed and success of my transition into this position. So again, thank you to everybody. I'm going to be working very closely with Tom, Carl, and the Finance Department in August as we begin the budget process. I would expect us to begin setting up the schedule for budget workshops with Council in the very near future, so something to be aware of. We have deadlines coming up in September to have the preliminary budget and levy prepared, which only gives us a couple months to start handling that. By then, we have to have everything together, especially with caretaking, to ensure we have the Merit Center and Red Baron Arena budgets nailed down and as accurate as we can be, along with continuing with the implementation of the capital improvement plan, which was put in place 4 or 5 years ago. All that coupled with transitions we've had in restructuring of the finance department and changes in key city staff makes it a fluid target, but we'll get it done. All in all, I really like what I've been seeing in the city. We have beautiful amenities for the public to use and tremendous support from the community. I had a pretty good idea of all this before I applied, by virtue of just living in Canby and visiting Marshall over the 6 years I was there, but being in the organization and seeing the nuts and bolts rather than just visiting it on the exterior, it's made me feel even better about belonging to the city. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to serve Marshall.
Very good. Thank you, Nicholas. We're very pleased that you're city administrator and look forward to a long tenure of your position here. You mentioned the Community Services Director. Maybe just give a brief update of that will be coming for affirmation of the appointment that you will be recommending, and that will come at the next regular council meeting.
Yes, at the next council meeting, which is on August 9th, we'll be coming forward with a recommendation to appoint him. Yes. So I'll have to switch that back to the 8th. Darn those elections getting in the way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nicholas? Not, then we'll move to the next agenda item. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We had a walkthrough of the Saratoga Street overpass and Highway 2 with MnDOT and the SCH representative today. Just making our punch list for the contractor. It might not be everything all-inclusive, but is pretty close to what we need to do. So quite a bit of the things have to do with the landscaping. We got our signage, additional signage that MnDOT installed with and for us as well. So if you haven't been through there lately, take a run through there. And my understanding is we have a counting device on the bridge so that we can see what sort of counts that we have going through there. The issue is it's not all, it doesn't count everything, so there might be some
Count pedestrians?
yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So just go back and forth real fast on the one end. And we've had the really good comments on the Main Street project with the sidewalks being installed. They're nearing completion, but there'll be a week or two left to get all the driveways and sidewalk finished. But that's going to be a real improvement to anyone who needs to get from downtown to out to the eastern part of the city. The other projects are going along very well, considering the rainfall that we got. We're fortunate we didn't get the rainfall that some communities got. So the projects are going right along. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Questions for Glenn? Glenn?
Do you have any idea when the staff's going to come forward with a recommendation on the mopeds issue?
It'll probably be at our next meeting.
Probably?
Yeah, the council's next meeting. Yeah.
Okay, that then brings us to Dennis, your report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Briefly, the move of the personal property items out of the Marshall Hotel has been concluded as was scheduled. Quist Moving and Storage did yeoman's work in very unpleasant, hot conditions to remove items out of that facility. When we last had this discussion, I know the council was very concerned about appliances in the building, appliances that may have ended up setting outside on public parking lots. We were able to contract with, I think it's called A&Z Recycling out of Porter, Minnesota. They recycle appliances. And for the very fine fee of $10 per appliance, they drove down here, picked up all of the appliances, and removed them. So I received a bill yesterday in the amount of $250. I think it's the best $250 the city has spent in a while. He removed all of the refrigerators, stoves, window air conditioning units, and they take them away for a $250 fee. They came right to the front door and removed them. Quist had a total of 350 boxes of material that were moved to 6 different locations in Lyon County where they are stored. They are palletized. They had one facility has pallets that contain newspapers on one pallet, law books on another pallet, reading entertainment books on another pallet, and pamphlets on another pallet. All the tables and chairs that were in the old Club 59 facility, those were moved to a different location. Scrap metal was sold for $63.70. But the facility, yes, now the remaining issue yet to be determined is valuation. What does the city have to pay to acquire the property? So that's the issue out there.
In there?
No. There may be one couch. There is a 500-pound pizza oven, but that's about it.
Okay. Anything else, Dennis?
No, thank you, Mayor.
With that, then, we'll move along then to agenda item number 24, the pending agenda items. Any questions about the pending agenda items? If not, agenda item number 25, the information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 26 will be the upcoming meetings. Any comments about upcoming meetings? Which brings us then to agenda item number 27, to consider adjourning this meeting.
I'll move that.
Motion
Second.
by David, seconded by Larry to adjourn. Discussion? Not,
Like the sauna?
yeah. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, we're adjourned.